This is a do-it-yourself project to make miniature planter hangers from bottle caps and floral wire with used dried tea bits for the soil or ground earth in a 1/12 scale. The method is adjustable for other miniature scales by using different size caps or beads and thread. Materials and suggested supplies needed for the project are shown and listed below. You can paint the planter base, or you can recycle and clean bottle caps, or use beads or purchased planters. These are some planters that have been filled with flowers in several different sizes. The large one, the 1/12 scale, is a bottle cap, and the ones in front are all beads from the pony bead all the way down to a seed bead. This cap measures about 1 inch in diameter and is about a 1/2 inch in height. There are a number of skincare lotions, makeup, or hair care products that have the same cap in this size. To make the hanger, I'm using a 32 gauge floral stem or wrapped wire and sewing thread. I did not complete a hanger using the hemp cord. I think I'll save that for another project. You can make the planter any color that you like. I'm going to use black, so I'm using black thread, and I need to make the floral wire in a black color. So I'm taking some matte acrylic paint, and I have a plastic glove that I'm going to put a little bit on my fingers, and I'm going to rub the wire through, the wrapped wire through my fingers to coat it real well. You could use a paintbrush too. And then I place it in some clamps, or you could hang it off of a little rack until that dries. I make 2 different styles of hanging hooks, one with a single arm and the other one with a 3 arm. You can also make the hook height depending on where you're going to hang your potted plant. I'm going to start off with about 2 1/4 inches in length that I'm going to cut off my dried floral wire. First, I'm going to show you how I make the little curve at the end of the arm or the branch. I take a round nose pliers or a jewelry type plier, and I'm going to just grip the end into the pliers, and depending how large you want to make the little hook curve, and then I bend it around, and then I take a look at it to see what I think. I think it needs to go up a little bit, and so you can just kind of work with that. I have another video, a prior video, it's called the miniature skirt hanger, where I show also as another reference or in more detail how to make this hook. But the first thing is you're going to cut that piece, then you bend the top around, and then you're going to bend the bottom base forward right there, so you kind of bend it toward an angle, and then you're going to take it and then straighten it downward to get your hook. And you may have to kind of fuss with it a little bit. And if it's not what you want, this wire is very flexible, and then you can shape it and kind of get it where you want it and straighten it out. And if it doesn't look like it's going the way you want to, just straighten it back out and start again. Now I'm using that 32 gauge wrapped floral wire, and I noticed as I'm doing it, you can definitely see some fuzzies from the material or the string that's wrapping the wire. And I try a different approach to get rid of some of those fuzzies, but I think it might be better just to use an unwrapped wire, or you could give that a try too. And so here I'm making a second attempt to get a different hook on this project that I started, and I'm actually using the full piece. I haven't cut it yet. It was a little bit easier for me to handle. And there's my other 2 1/4, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that at that length with my wire cutters. To give the wire more strength, I decide to add a coat of super glue after I place the little hook into a clamp, and I coat it all the way around with the super glue. Kind of gives a little bit of a shiny appearance, but it gives it strength, and it kind of takes away some of that fuzziness in addition to making it stronger. And I have this in fast speed, but make sure you take your time when you do the super glue so you don't accidentally get it stuck onto something you don't want to, and follow the directions on whatever brand that you use. And do apply the super glue in a well ventilated area. And once you get it coated, then set it aside to dry. For the 3-branch or 3-arm hanging planter, cut 2 more straight pieces. Next, dab a little tiny bit of tacky glue to the ends of the wrapped floral wire, and then kind of rub it around just to kind of keep it from fraying. And now we're ready to make the join of the 3 pieces together. That was my first attempt, and it was a little bit bulky right there at the join. So I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to use the thread to join it instead of wire. So I put the 2 pieces to add, I dip them in glue, and tacky glue. And I'm going to attach them right there at the end of the hook. Just kind of hold it there. Use a toothpick and apply some tacky glue to all 3 pieces, the front, the back, and the sides, as shown. Then take the black thread and start wrapping around into the glue, about 1/4 of an inch or so down and around. After about 10 to 15 times around the 3 pieces, add some more glue. Cut the thread with your scissors. I should have probably cut it all the way to the edge of where I bound the 3 pieces together, but go ahead and cut it, and then you're going to secure that join with some more super glue. So go all the way around the threaded area with the super glue, and then let that dry. Before I add the hanger to the plant base, I need to drill some holes. I want them to be about 1/8 of an inch down. So I take the diameter of the inside of my plant base, and it's about 7/8 of an inch. So I make a rectangle out of 7/8 of an inch sides. And I mark the spots at the 3 little points, about 1/8 of an inch down. And then I'm going to take my hand drill and make those little holes. Another option, instead of drilling holes, is to glue the 3 pieces inside the edges of the planter base. Here I'm testing the wire to make sure it goes into the hole, and this is just a test piece, and then I'm going to fold it up, the little end from the inside, with the tweezers. And so the whole idea is to fold it up, and then the 3 branch pieces will be joined together. Each time that you cut the branches or the pieces of wire, make sure you add a little dab of glue at the end to stop it from fraying. Next, I'm going to make a circle to fill the top of the planter base so I can put some soil on top before I add the hangers. And I measure it, make a little pencil mark, and then I cut it out. I'm using a piece of brown cardstock, but you can use any color. I want to test it to make sure it can fit in the top of the planter and below the little holes that I've drilled. Then I take out the brown cardstock circle so I can make the faux soil, and I'm going to use dried tea bits from a used tea bag. This is a chai tea bag from Twinnings, but you can use whatever flavor you like. And I put a little bit out, and then I like to glue half of one side of the brown circle and then add the tea bits to them, and I press them down. I kind of let it dry for a little bit, and then I'll go ahead and glue the other side and then press some more tea bits into it. And when that is dry, I shake it off a little bit, and I'm going to check it again with my planter just for a little fit. I'm probably going to have to push that in just a little bit before I add the branches. Now you'll notice that underneath there's a little bit extra space there, and I want to add some filler to help hold up the little ground soil cardstock. And so I'm going to use some little foam balls, and I'm just going to kind of push them in to make sure they're all kind of level. And you could glue those in if you wanted to, but you could use paper or clay or anything else that you'd like to help hold it up. Another option for the ground soil is to use landscaping materials for train track models. Some people use coffee grounds. There are so many options. Once the filler is in the planter base, you can glue the top of it so that the cardstock ground earth can be added. Gently press down the cardstock all the way around, and then again you're going to try to make sure that you get the cardstock and the ground soil underneath the little holes. The super glue should be dried from the little hook and the branches. I'm going to cut that little piece of thread off quick, and then I'm going to take the clamp off and just kind of spread it out just to make sure it looks like it's going to hold fast at the join. And then I fold the pieces, all three pieces, back together, and I'm going to cut them so they're all level with the shortest piece there with my wire cutters. And then touch up the ends with some tacky glue and then rub that in to make that, or stop it from fraying. Spread the arm branches out. Then bend the bottom about 1/4 inch on all three pieces, kind of an L shape. Apply super glue to the bend areas and let that dry. Then insert the bends into the holes on the planter. I went from the outside to the inside, taking care to gently place them in to the holes. I'm trying not to bend the wires, and the wires are still kind of flexible even though I have super glue on them. I'm thinking maybe you could go to a little bit larger wire to help it retain its shape. Then I use the tweezers to fold over the 1/4 inch up toward the large branch from the inside to the outside to make the little loop. Once I've made that, the bend up toward the large branch, I just leave it like that. I don't add any glue, but you could add glue to that. And then you can adjust the branches and the arms to shape and get the hook so it's a little bit more vertical. Again, you also, instead of drilling the holes, you could just glue the branches straight into the soil by poking holes down along the edge. I do like the join on the right side where I use the sewing thread. It looks better than the one on the left where I use the wire. For the second style of the hanger, which is the single hook, I make a hole in the center of the planter with a pin or a toothpick and kind of jiggle it around. Then I add glue to the hook base and place it into the planter hole vertically. The hanging planters are ready for flowers. To make larger scale hanging planter sizes like 1/6 scale, use the same process as 1/12 except with a larger container and thicker gauge wire. To make the smaller scales, select smaller containers and thinner wire or use sewing thread. To make the hangers for the 1/16, 1/24 scales, I used thinner wire and curved it as I did with the 1/12 scale. Then I repeated the steps for the soil and filler and the hanger. For the 1/48 and 1/144 scales, I used sewing thread formed over a toothpick and quilter or sewing pin. Paint may work to change the color of the containers, but it may be a little bit thick for the smaller scales. Another option is to use a permanent marker. To make the hook with sewing thread, I wrap a generous length around the toothpick. Then I join the ends together, apply glue, and gently twist. I let it dry. So I might cut, it's probably about 3 or 4 inches of thread, and you can do a single layer with just one thread, or you can make it with 2 pieces of thread to make it a little bit thicker for the 1/44 scale, and then for the 1/144 scale, just use a single thread. And then I'll take a little glue, which I have glue all over my fingers now, and then just kind of rub those pieces together in the center of the threads, just with tacky glue. And then I'll put it around the toothpick, and then just kind of gently twist it. Had to get that glue piece off. Gently twist it around, not too tight, just so that those pieces of thread are together. And then make sure it's still loose around the toothpick. And you kind of want that thread to be as straight as you can get it. And then set it aside to dry. I use a quilter's pin or a sewing pin for the 1/144 scale. and 1 strand of sewing thread. Same process, add a little glue kind of to the center where I want the loop to be, and then I'm going to put it around, and then I'm going to twist it. This is definitely fidgety. I'm always trying to challenge myself to do these smaller scales just to see if I can do them. And set that aside to dry too. After a few minutes, when the tacky glue is dry, I place the thread into a clamp, and now I'm going to add some super glue, a very thin coat, and try to keep the loop clear and so it doesn't form like a little bubble. So just go around the edges. If you get a little bubble, kind of poke it through just to give it some strength. When dry, use a craft knife with a very sharp blade to change the loop into a hook shape. Place the thread loops onto a cutting mat and then hold the tail end of the little loop and start where the loop touches to the longer part of the thread and just remove that piece, separate it, and then take little bits off, a little bit at a time, to try to get that hook shape. And I keep looking at it to see, okay, I need to go a little bit, I need to cut a little bit more off. So I'm taking my time because it's so little. And then I check it again to see, is that going to be a nice looking hook? Is that going to be okay? And I like it. And you've noticed that I'm just using the blade here instead of the full craft knife. I just feel like I have a little bit more control by just holding the blade, so you just have to be really careful with that. And now I'm going to cut a piece of looped thread, just a single loop, the smallest one that I did around a pin, and this one I did not super glue. I just kind of wanted to show you what happens once you cut it and you separate it and then you try to make the hook. Because there's no super glue or anything to keep it together or give it a little bit more strength, the hook just completely opens up. Here's a comparison with the super glue on the left and the non-super glued on the right. Next, cut the hooks to fit into the little beads or the containers to the length that you need. And then glue them into the little beads or your containers. Now, you can do it without having the flowers already in there, or you can just glue it right into the bead and then add the flowers. I tried to make a 3-arm branch with a thread and using a bead. First I tied 3 pieces of thread together. Then I glued the knot inside of the bead. Next I pulled up the thread and then I glued those 3 pieces together. Then I cut the thread at the top and then I glued a separately made hook on the top. I hope you like and share this video, making tiny hanging planters. Thank you so much for watching.